Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Zarov's chess channel, and welcome to the round 5 of the Magnus Carlsen Invitational tournament in 2020. So we're continuing to follow the biggest online chess event in history. It's again Fabiano Caruana versus Magnus Carlsen in their third rapid game. In the first two games, Magnus Carlsen won the games, but still I think that Magnus was lost in two positions. So I think Caruana had better continuations, but still, it's of course every players make mistakes in this very fast time format. So it's just the difference, in my opinion, between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana is that really Magnus uses all of your weaknesses, uses all of your inaccuracies and mistakes in the game. Fabiano Caruana, in order to make maybe some kind of a progress, should be sharper, should really search even more for tactics. He had his chances. I really liked his rook sacrifice in the first game, but he lost the game. This is now round 3. Fabiano has to make something happen in order to have some kind of a chance. He has to win the next two games in order to get this to this Armageddon game. So let's see what happens. E4 played by Fabiano. We have E5 by Magnus, so he didn't play the Alekhine defense again. He played now the normal Ruy Lopez, more firm, I think, opening, a more solid opening to make a draw here. If Magnus gets a draw, of course he will win the match game. So knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5, the common theory of the Ruy Lopez, a6, bishop to a4, here knight to f6, the Murphy defense of the Ruy Lopez, and now we have castling played by Caruana. The idea can be also, of course, to play knight takes e4. After d4 we have really a dynamic game in the center, but most of the times it will transpose into this Berlin wall. So in the game, Magnus played the move b5, attacking the bishop, and bishop to b3. This is still common theory. After bishop to c5, there is also this immediate idea to play knight takes e5, but Caruana will play on that idea a couple moves later. Here we have a4 first, and now rook to b8, as we have some, of course, some tactical threats on the a file, because the threat was, of course, a takes b5. In some occasions, you could try here to play the move bishop to b7 after a takes b5, a takes b. Still, you don't have worries about this rook on a8, but Magnus prepared here a more deeper line, I think, with staying with this bishop on this diagonal. You see the importance why this bishop should stay on this diagonal so far. So rook to b8 was played, and we have a takes b, a takes b5, and now comes this tactic which allows white now to continue the game with the bishop pair, because you have to take knight takes e5 and d4. This is also still common theory. Players didn't make mistakes so far here, so it's not a problem that Magnus lost the bishop pair after bishop takes d4, queen takes d4. We have now the opportunity to play the move d6 like Magnus played, really a solid, strong pawn structure in the center. Now our main goal is to push the pawn on c5, and even c4 is very, very dangerous. So see, even Magnus doesn't have anymore the bishop pair. Still, it's a good position where you have some counterattack possibility chances, and here you see the importance that this bishop is aiming on the king side, because it has such a better activity than maybe here on b7. Here we could also try knight to g4 ideas, maybe include this knight in the attack. So f4 played by Caruana, kicking away the knight. Maybe knight to g6 is also an idea. The idea when you place this knight like that against these two centralized pawns is to really force your opponent to do some pawn moves in the center with e5. Then we want really simplifications. We want really clarification in the center, because after potential f5, then we could again cement our knight on e5. So here in the game, Magnus tried here the more aggressive move, knight to c6, attacking the queen, and Fabiano continued with queen to c3. You cannot take, of course, the pawn. Your knight is hanging, so that's why Magnus played knight to e7, keeping the position again compact in front of the king, because he doesn't have the bishop here. He doesn't want this position to be opened. And in the game, rook to a7 played by Fabiano Caruana, attacking the c7 weakness. Okay, Caruana has, of course, won the battle on the a file, has a good activity, but it allows now Magnus to play the move c5. And now the game becomes really, really dynamic, because Caruana played this very aggressive e5, which is okay. Magnus didn't castle so far, so it's a good idea to challenge black immediately in the center. And now we have knight to e4 and queen to f3 played by Caruana. Attacking the knight, we have d5, and here I think again Caruana didn't find the best of continuations. It's of course a rapid, and of course I'm analyzing some games on with some engines. That's not the point. But what I always a little bit didn't like always, but about Caruana is this lack of aggressive play. So here he has maybe he played the move c3. He has maybe here the opportunity to play this move bishop to d5. Really, it would be an aggressive move, because if you take, for instance, with the knight, then we can simply take the knight and continue the game with one pawn up. But if you take with the queen, then you see we have rook to d1 attacking the queen after something like c4. b3 is here a good continuation for white. After queen to c2, you lost another pawn, but that's not a problem. We have knight to a3. You get your development, you get some tempos on the queen. The problem is black didn't castle. So here, again, if you castle, then you simply lose the knight. So in the possible continuation, queen to c3 could be an option, but now, finally, queen takes e4, and after queen takes b3, knight to c2. Okay, white has lost a pawn, but I still think that black has some troubles here. You cannot castle, the knight is hanging. You could try maybe here to attack the queen with bishop to f5, but still I think we can simply stay on this diagonal and try to defend here. Even the possibilities to take here this knight on e7, maybe to regroup. I'm just saying that many tactical possibilities Caruana missed in these two match games against Magnus Carlsen. So it's really a little bit. I'm really a bit sorry for Fabiano, because he plays really great opening theories. He plays really great positional games, but sometimes it seems to me that he misses some tactics. Here, knight to c2 solves all of the positional problems. Black is really, I think, a little bit paralyzed here. With the king in the center, we would have the opportunity to maybe try to g4, f5 pawn breakthroughs. Still, you have to, of course, improve the position of the bishop with some bishop to e3 ideas, but I still like white's position even more with this piece activity in the game. Caruana played the passive move c3, and it allows now Magnus Carlsen to pull off some tactics. He played, of course, first the move c4, and now after bishop to c2, now comes a very tricky move, bishop to g4. Great attacking move. The idea behind this move is to play the move queen to b6 and take out the rook. So that's why this c4 idea was very important to liberate the dark squares. In the game bishop to g4, Caruana simply took this first piece because his rook was hanging. Queen takes e7 and queen takes g4, but now comes queen to c5 with this smothered mate preparation. Here king to h1 had to be played, but now knight to f2. You have to give up your rook here, because then you get the cool smother mate. If you, for instance, play something like king to g1, then you get this checkmate pattern. Knight to h3, king to h1, queen to g1 is the possibility. After rook takes g1, knight to f2, it's a checkmate. So this is this common checkmate pattern of the smother mate. So that's why you see in this position Caruana had to take rook takes f2, queen takes f2, and this is really a weird position, as Magnus has two rooks for three minor pieces. Caruana has also a more healthy pawn structure, because these two pawns are backward pawns, but you have to regroup here a little bit. The queen has to retreat first on the first rank. There were some checkmate threats on f1, so after castling, now bishop to d2 played by Magnus, and now comes d4. So improving the position of the pawn, really an aggressive move by Magnus Carlsen. After c takes d4, rook to d8. This pawn cannot be protected. It's really a problematic pawn. You could have some troubles again also on the a file. So in the game, queen to c1 was played, trying to keep the position compact, and here Magnus played another aggressive move, b4, but it was, I think, a really necessary move by Magnus. Here you can simply take first this pawn and then continue the game with some b4, c3, or b4, b3 or c3 ideas. So I think he should have taken the pawn, but in the game he tried a more aggressive b4. It allows now Caruana to play the move bishop to e3 and regroup a little bit after queen to e2, bishop to g1, and now comes c3, which again wasn't maybe the most accurate of attacking moves here by Magnus, but of course in this time format, maybe rook to a8 here is much more powerful, because here these pawns are playing a very important restricting role. This knight cannot come out, then you risk some dangerous threats. If you try, for instance, f5, then you get b3 after something like bishop to d1. Here queen to e1 would be a possibility. So now this rook will finally come into the game, and we could also attack this weak b2 pawn. So the queen is a little bit stuck here in this position. That's why I think rook to a8 is a more natural move in the game. You see, Magnus Carlsen, of course, was very confident after winning these two games, so he probably felt his confidence. He probably felt that he cannot lose this game. He tried c3 after b takes c3, knight takes c3. He saw these tactics, these problems on the c file. He played, of course, queen to c4, and now after knight to d1, rook to c8. Now we have some troubles on the c file, but Caruana calculated all of that and finally defended its bishop with the move knight to e3. Queen takes d4 is, of course, the continuation. Now Magnus has grabbed a very important pawn, because if Magnus wouldn't have taken this pawn, then this move d5, d6 would be very dangerous even for this rook, so to handle such a pawn storm in the center. So queen takes d4. It was, of course, Magnus Carlsen calculation to this particular point, but here it's still a playable game for both sides. As from Black's perspective, we would love to play something like maybe f5, f6, crack the position in front of Black's king. Queen to h6 is also very dangerous, even some checkmate threats. That's one of my ideas, how to make maybe some kind of a progress. Also, bishop to b1. Of course, I'm just saying some positional ideas. Bishop to b1, queen to c2. If the position allows it, maybe get use of this diagonal. Of course, it's not possible so far, but white has also some great attacking chances with his minor pieces, as this bishop on g1 plays a very important defensive role here. Queen to f1, played by Caruana. Here queen to d2 by Carlsen, and now queen to b1, attacking here this h7 pawn, h6, and now h3 also by Caruana, creating some breathing space, and now rook to c3. What Carlsen would love to do here is maybe to give up the rook for two minor pieces, then to go maybe into a rook versus minor piece endgame, which would be a winning endgame. So that's why, of course, queen to b6 here played by Caruana. So far, rook takes c2, knight takes c2 ideas don't work, because then you get your queen deflected from the defense of this rook on d8. So that's why here queen to d4 played by Magnus, and now queen to a5. Carlsen played the move rook to c5, attacking the queen. We have queen to a7. Caruana has to win this game. This is the problem. If Caruana would have more time on the clock, probably he would have even seen better continuations. Now it's time really to stay with the pieces on the board. Here rook takes c2. Carlsen tried to find this simplification line. As I said, he needs only draw. Rook takes c2, knight takes c2, and now queen takes f4. Still, this is playable again for both sides, as Caruana has two minor pieces for the rook. Knight to d4 played by Caruana. You cannot take this pawn, of course. You get the fork on c6 and you lose a piece. So great tactics by Caruana, protecting his pawn on e5 in a different way. And now queen to e4, and now finally queen to b6. Again, you cannot take. Caruana is protecting his knight still, and here rook to d5 was played, and now knight to f3. Everything is glued together, and it's time now for Caruana also to attack. Here, white has maybe a slightly advantage. He has to play this endgame perfectly in order to make something happen in the game. Rook to d3 played by Magnus, and now queen to b8. We have king to h7. Queen to b1, creating some discovered attacks on the queen. So that's why Magnus again tried to simplify the game, because when the queens are off the board, if this game goes into an endgame with rook versus two minor pieces and three pawns on the board, this would be a draw. So here queen to f1 was played, and this was I think the main mistake of Caruana, he should have proceeded here with the move queen to a2. This move I think wins the game because your f7 pawn is hanging. If you try to sacrifice some pieces, then we can simply regroup with queen to g2, or if you don't react, you see, then your f7 pawn is hanging. Basically, it's very hard here for Magnus Carlsen to defend this pawn. So here he missed really this move queen to a2 in the game. He played this passive move again, queen to f1, didn't find a counterattack, and Magnus, of course, uses this moment and simply regroups again. Rook to d3, bishop to f2 was played, and now rook to b3. We have king to h2, as the threat was to play this rook to b1 idea, which was Magnus Carlsen's next move. Rook to b1, we have queen to a6, and now simply rook to a2, simply attacking these minor pieces, creating some checks. This is really easy now for Magnus Carlsen to find the drawish move, sort of, because he, as I said, needs only a draw. Bishop to g1, and now queen to c2, creating some dangerous checkmate on g2. Knight to h5 had to be played, and now g5 doesn't bring you so much. If you want to deflect this knight, then you get, of course, queen to f7, so it's not a possibility in the game. Queen to e4, Magnus tries a different way to attack this knight, which is the defender of this g2, but Caruana defends it with queen to e7. So far you cannot take this pawn, and in the game Magnus simply played rook to b7. We have queen to d8, again rook to h3. This is also a tactical threat to take out this pawn, because the pawn is here pinned by the queen against the king, so that's why knight to f3 again, and now rook takes f3, g takes f3, queen takes f3. This is now a theoretical draw, because you risk always this perpetual check. That's the main problem, but if you regroup, then of course Magnus Carlsen can take another pawn in the game. King to h2 was played, and here Magnus simply played queen to f4, king to g2, and now queen to e4, king to f1, queen to f3, bishop to f2, and now queen takes h3. This is really a theoretical draw in this position. Both of these players agreed to a draw. Let's see a possible continuation. King to g1, again you get these checks, and here you can simply you cannot escape from these checks by the queen. Even if you try to go here to the queen side, still these three pawns against the bishop is of course a draw. Magnus can always play these checks, that's why he didn't want to trade off the queens in this early stage of the endgame. Now with the queens off the board, it's really hard for white to win this game, and as I said, after 3 rounds the result is 2.5 against half point for Magnus Carlsen. Great games they played so far. As I said, Caruana had in all of these games his chances, but didn't use them. I'm a little bit sorry, but he had really this tactical problems, I think, in this fast time format. As we know, Fabiano Caruana is maybe not one of the best blitz or rapid players. He's really great in this classical time format. I'm sure that he would have seen some great ideas if this was, of course, a classical time format game. But in this fast time control, he has really some troubles and missed some tactics and lost the game eventually. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this match game. Here I'll stop. I have some family duties, also some working duties. Meanwhile, you can watch my other analyzed Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana chess games. Here are the links, and you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.